Hello, and welcome to Glam High's panel on iconic style. We're going to take you inside the industry into what some of the most dynamic image crafters utilize as a means of getting inspired to build images for their clients or build the fashion that we all covet and want. So I'm going to introduce you to our panelists. First, we've got Lindsay Foreman, who works at the top tier of client curation for Farfetch. We've got Janelle Miller, who is one of the preeminent stylists working now in Los Angeles, bringing a really dynamic image to Khloe Kardashian. And we have Christian Jules Nielsen, who cut his teeth as a designer with some of the most influential creatives internationally, and is now helming the team at Hervé Leger. I am Keyboy Chase Marshall. I worked for many years as an apparel and accessories designer before pivoting into editorial. And now I work as an advocate founding the Kelly Initiative that works to bring race equity to fashion industries. So thanks for joining us today. What I want to do, first of all, is get our panelists talking a little bit about how iconic style first entered sort of their vision. So let's go back in time. And let's talk a little bit about your first experiences with people whose style inspired you. So we're going to round robin this. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, Janelle.
I knew it.
Isn't that always the way?
I knew it. It's like when you're in school and you're like, don't pick on me, don't pick on me. From whenever I was younger.
Yeah.
Honestly, the first person that comes to mind is Tiffany Amber Thiessen in Saved by the Bell.
Wow.
Wow. Total throwback, but I thought she was so cool. Just like, I feel like it was her style plus her overall attitude. You know what I mean?
So Tiffany Amber Thiessen as Kelly Kapowski.
Exactly.
On Saved by the Bell, she was, I mean, they were all Southern California kids, but what was her variant of the Southern California kid that you really responded to?
I mean, I don't know, really. I feel like they all had, like, I feel like Lisa had her own, like, baggier situation, which was cool. You know what I mean? I feel like Tori Spelling had her more, like, sexy thing. I feel like Tiffany Amber Thiessen was, like, cool and sexy without being, like, so sexy in your face. Like, I feel like it was her attitude that kind of brought everything together.
Okay.
Which kind of leads me to my biggest style icon from whenever I was younger.
Uh-huh.
Are you ready for this? Shania Twain.
I'm ready. I'm buckled up.
Loved. And still do love Shania Twain. Like, I just felt like she, especially back then, like, freaking killed it. Like, I was like, honestly, like, I remember I made my mom whenever I was, like, super young buy her VHSs of her music videos. I would just, like, sit there and watch them because I just thought she was so freaking cool. And she is.
We're not going to pretend that you don't look like Shania Twain. We are incapable.
I love you for saying that. Yes.
So okay.
I just want to record that part. Can someone record that and send it to me?
So I definitely now can see the through line and evolution because Shania's like iconic style is jaw dropping. You can't miss it. It's very sexy. It's definitely about the body. Christian, can you talk to us a little bit about the people that first really grabbed your eye style-wise?
Like the first one that sort of, if I think like iconic style, the first one for me is Michelle Pfeiffer in Scarface.
Wow. So this is the bob with the bangs.
And those like satin dresses with no bra and like just the sort of whole fabulousness.
Like brassy dipped.
Yeah.
Okay. That is,
I mean, one thing is how she dressed, but also the whole attitude and like she was so tough, but she was so beautiful and feminine at the same time.
Yeah.
I think it's partly my, for my Galliano years, we always looked at icons for as inspiration and muses for collections. And she has so much to give as a style in that.
Oh, definitely. I think Michelle Pfeiffer is one of those people that in her essence has this color tonality. So like everything in the Michelle Pfeiffer world is this like brassy golden sort of hue. That to me is kind of fascinating to think about. Lindsay, can you tell us some of the people or a person that first captivated you style-wise?
Yeah, I mean, I have, I guess, kind of like two viewpoints on this, because the first person that like really captivated me would definitely have been my mom.
Wow.
So she has, and still to this day has had a huge, tremendous impact on my personal style.
And where
And
did you grow up?
So I'm from Baltimore originally, excuse me. But I would say I'm kind of, a New Yorker now.
Okay.
But yeah, my mom has been kind of, we joke, like the OG boss. So she had her own company, and was kind of pioneering in her industry. She was in corporate interior design. So, I think for me.
So am I getting like Julia Sugarbaker designing women energy?
Kind of like super fierce. Like we have all these kind of like beautiful like articles, covers of magazines, of like business journals, because the corporate interior design world, that's a lot of law firms, banks, hospitals, very male dominated, especially, in the rooms she was walking into. So style was definitely something that was very important to her. And from a young age, I just absorbed kind of everything every day.
Lindsay, I grew up in suburban Maryland, closer to Washington, D.C.
No way.
My mother was an interior architect.
Wow.
Yeah, working on law firms and corporate. So
Oh
I'm totally following you. Yes.
Okay, we're gonna have to like touch base offline, because we're gonna just like completely take over, and we don't want to do that. But yeah, so I think the story that kind of like my mom likes to tell if we're together, because we're tremendously close. That she came down, and I love jewelry, and I would say she loves jewelry more than anyone I know. But she came down one day, and I was like about 4. And she's like, I had a full suit on. I had all these layers of necklaces. She would get dressed to the nines every day. And she said, you looked up at me, and you looked at my necklaces, and you said, "Mommy, too much."
Oh.
And she was literally like, that is when I knew, that. So I would say she has.
So, there's that iconic Coco Chanel sort of quote about taking off one thing. So basically you, as a child, having that intuition, you showed signs of style genius at an early age.
I mean, I wouldn't say that about myself, but thank you. I think just, she, I would be in her office after hours. She'd be working late, and I would curl up and take a nap on like these big voluminous fur coats under her drafting tables. Or I would be, in her closet, like feeling all of her silk blouses. And, she collected Hermes. Oh, she still does, but, I would say more avidly was collecting Chanel scarves. So I loved like tactile, like the textures, the colors, the patterns. So yeah, I would say
like too. It was more Marshalls, but now tell me. So
it's all good. It's the high and the low.
That was your immediate purview. Then when you started really becoming passionate about style, who were some of the people outside of your immediate reach that were inspired?
Yeah. So I've kind of always been an old soul myself. And, a lot of my friends, my boyfriend, everyone kind of jokes, like I kind of just, the way that people look sometimes to movies or TV or pop culture, I really look to editorial, even from a young age. And that's where I would find my personal inspiration, where like a lot of my friends would be watching kind of what was going on. Of course, I was up with what was going on, but that wasn't necessarily what like energized me. So I would be ripping out everything from editorials and putting it all over the walls, creating my own inspiration books. And so I really looked to, I would say like the editorial community, in the sense like a Diana Vreeland, who really like inspired me, not just from a stylistic, inspiration, but also from like a career. Like it was kind of like the 360. She's just one example, but I definitely gravitated towards that side of inspiration, I would say earlier in my life. Now I'm trying to like catch up on all of my like cinematography. I'm like actually a little behind, but yeah.
Yeah, you know, the Diana Vreeland is a funny, or not a funny, a fascinating example, because she's someone who is a taste maker. So she's in many ways defining or defined an entire sort of generation of an industry's tastes, but then herself as well had sort of a signature iconic taste. People that do that are really fascinating. While you were talking, I did something, because I always think that this is the fun of this, is that we have to get into the visual. So I pulled up your references. So here we can see some of
I'm dead.
Kelly Kapowski's moments to not ever be forgotten. So I want to highlight here some things that I think oddly are important. Again, this elevation of the jeans waistline, really fascinating to see that so important again. And then I think this SoCal sensibility that is so important in streetwear and especially in this COVID era has so centralized in the style dialogue. Then let's look at the golden dipped goddess, Michelle here. These disco-y halter dresses are some of my fave. Really, really beautiful. Do you incorporate like these really sort of like focused references into the collections you do, Christian?
Yeah, I do. I actually like to put a girl in each collection that I sort of use as an inspiration.
Okay.
And have some sort of collecting materials, sketching, etc. I kind of somewhat visualize this woman wearing it.
Wow.
I did do one collection where I worked around this film actually, and you'll see that I did a lot of knitted tops that were transparent here, and then you had those sort of lingerie dresses as intarsia in the dresses. So yeah, I definitely use these kind of images all the time and constantly.
Come back to them. And then let's look at Deanna Vreeland, who I definitely had a certain period of obsession with these tusk necklaces. So I was doing a tusk necklace for a bit there. I also love this crimson sensibility that is so part of her language.
Can we talk about her posing? The way she poses. I've done this look several times on dress up night, and it's like you're like, guess who I am, and you do this one. Like the little mysterious mouse, she's almost laughing.
Christian,
what about this one?
Just as I can easily
just get a bone.
Just as I can easily see Janelle channeling Shania, I can see you channeling Deanna. I see that.
Oh, honey, a lot of people saw that.
You just brought that to life.
So,
oh my God.
So then, as you all started to sort of develop, so I'll personalize it first, and then I'll toss it at you all. So, like, as I worked as a designer, I felt it very necessary to have sort of like a filter of like, at any given point, there are like 5 people where I'm like, would they wear this? Would they take this seriously? Would they invest in this? Who are some of those people that as you do your work, you like use as friends in your head, touchstones of like, if they're not messing with it, I'm not messing with it. Are there people that operate like that for you? And anyone can hop in here.
I can start. I mean, unless someone else wants to start, I can start. But I think that there are some tremendous mentors that I've had, you know, in my career, that have curated incredible collections for some of their clients over, you know, being consultants over the years. And then I have, as I've built my career, kind of gone along, you know, through the journey with them. And I think that they are incredible barometers for me, because sometimes they are curating collections that will sometimes be donated, you know, maybe to the Met or to somewhere else at a certain point in time. And so
do they have any sort of like taste doctrines that you have sort of brought into your own work?
Meaning specific, I'm sorry, like specific brands or like specific
or
pieces?
Like saying like always add like a elevated fabric into the mix, never a heel after this time, or like any, I don't know.
So, yeah, I think that like I like to say about myself, so my style, my personal style is very eccentric, and is, I would say, verging on the more is more. Okay. But my professional outlook is that I am here to kind of be a chameleon to that client. Okay. In the sense that, you know, everyone's looking for something different. I'm not, you know, necessarily kind of bringing my own very literal personal style to them, but I'm here to push them a little further than they would certainly go on their own. Okay. And kind of be like their sounding board, their concierge, if you will, for anything that they would need. But yeah, so that's kind of my doctrine over time, is that my style is certainly very eccentric, but that's not necessarily my end goal for working with clients.
Cool. Janelle, who are some of the people who you sort of like in your mind all like reach back to say like, is that the coat they would wear? Or is that the color they would wear? Who are some of those people?
What do you mean? Like designer-wise, or just like people in
designers general? Or people in the media dialogue, celebrities or famous people that operate in that iconic space style-wise for you? And maybe that's not how you work. Is it how you work? Do you sort of have certain people that really inspired you? Like I know I've worked for some people who reserved like a special place for this pantheon of American high taste of Jackie Kennedy, Grace Kelly, and Audrey Hepburn. And so they're like,
say it again.
So everything is like, and like that's a Katharine Hepburn slack. It's that way. And are there people, now that's classic Hollywood. Some people, their style icons are like punk rock or hip hop. Are there people that operate that way for you?
I mean, I think it depends on the client, to be honest. I feel like some of the clients like pull in their own, I mean, you know what I mean? I feel like it's kind of a collaborative situation where they'll send me things, and yes, it's probably kind of, I mean, honestly, I feel like a lot of people send Rihanna at this day and age.
Wow.
Like as a style icon, because she does, I feel like she's able to do so much variety. Like she could be sexy, she could be like a badass, she can be whatever. There's so many things that she's able to bring to the table that I think it's very easy to kind of just as a modern day situation be like, okay, this is like a dope situation, how she did, whether it's like a cat suit and a fur, or like just something that maybe somebody else could wear, but I don't know, just something about how she pulls things together, but then she's sexy, or she's like kind of like baby dollish. Do you know what I mean? I think just I mean, honestly, I feel like client wise, Rihanna, I probably get like sent Rihanna
more than anyone else,
more than anybody else.
Christian, who are some, so you mentioned obviously Michelle Pfeiffer, who are some of the people that really you, beyond like a single collection, you use as almost like taste filters, icon wise?
To be honest, in my work, with the way you asked the question in the beginning, I do it a lot more with people I know personally.
Oh, wow.
When I design, I design a lot, as I said, either I'll have like an icon in mind, but then alongside that, I think about girls I know, girls I hang out with. I'm very social. I'm out in New York a lot, like sort of dinners, events and everything. And I see my friends, how they dress. And a lot of the time I'll be like, okay, Hervé Léger is obviously like a particular brand with a certain style. And I'm like, how can I get this friend who's super chic, who'll always wear like an oversized trench coat with a turtleneck or whatever? How can I get her to, like, how would she look in this kind of dress? So I don't really live that sort of fantasy way of like, oh, how would Cher wear this or whatever, these big icons. I think more about real women and what, you know, I can, you know, I've if you knew my friends, I could say, you know, this girl always, you know how she dresses, she would look great with this and this look. So I use more real life.
When you note that those friends are really dynamic in the way they dress, what is it that like, what's the level they get to, or what are some of the things they do that you're like, that's important?
That's
like
exactly the answer to that.
Tell me.
It's arriving. And I love designing what I call arriving garments. And I do this a lot more on my own brand, Arcanvas, and Hervé Léger. Hervé Léger is more when you're there, what you're wearing. But what's super important for me at Arcanvas, I do these trench coats with shoulder pads, and they're super thin nylon. So you arrive at the, do you know a place like Indochine, for example, a restaurant? You have a long kind of runway in the middle of it. Yeah. And you see person after person doing that runway. For some reason, they always need to go to the restroom or whatever is at the end so that they can come in their arrival look. And I personally, like, I love arriving looks. I think that's what sort of makes a lot of the girls that I find inspiring iconic.
You know, it's so funny. Lindsay, you were talking about now sort of diving deep into classic film to sort of develop a reference bank. And there is that scene in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, where it's Marilyn Monroe and Gina Rowlands? No. Yeah, they're entering, and it's that arrival moment. And it's funny because they're in like taffeta gowns, and it's so fascinating for me to think about how, whether it's a taffeta gown or a trench coat, there's a certain like sensibility and volume and shape and the way it moves through the space and like walking into a restaurant. And it's really a dot connector to hear you talk about that as a designer. Go ahead, Lindsay.
No, I'm just nodding my head. It's sort of in agreement with you both, because I think I don't really have anything more that I can add that was more fabulous than was already said. So it's more just like, I was like very excitingly like acknowledging like what you were saying.
Yeah, there is. I love that idea of that. I mean, I really as well respond to, you use the term arrival clothes. I always love like the clothes that are the most frequently a part of our lives. So the clothes we wear every day. I like events and stuff like that, but I'm really fascinated by the clothes that more than not our friends, our family encounter us in. And I like that idea of arrival clothing. Janelle, tell me about when you're working with a client and they are pursuing iconic status. What are some of your strategies for getting them inarguably noticed, for dropping jaws, for getting, you know, camera flash bulbs to blow? Like, tell me some of the ways where you're like, we're going to hit the ball out of the park this time.
I mean, again, I think that it kind of just starts with collaborating between like what they're thinking that they want. So you obviously still have to stay true to, you know what I mean, like what they're thinking and what they're comfortable in. But it's also just kind of like pushing them a little further than they would typically like go, I guess, on their own. I think as a stylist and as a designer and as whatever, that's kind of what you have to keep in mind, is obviously it's a collaboration, because you can't just like push whatever you're thinking on somebody else, because if they're not like receiving that information and that's not what they want, or they don't feel comfortable in it, then that's obviously not going to work. But I think just pushing them to the point where it's kind of like you're giving them something that they didn't know that they needed from the beginning. So like working together, maybe they have this idea of like a high-low skirt. I'm just using this as an example because it kind of happened with like a crop top or whatever. So you kind of like take that, maybe it wasn't even that. I think it was like a ball gown with like a crop top. So then we kind of made it into like a high-low, like sexier situation, but like but bigger on the bottom, and like I don't know what it is, but I think just like collabing together and then just
maybe amplifying their idea. So if they have sort of the seed of the idea, sort of pumping up the volume a little bit.
Exactly, right.
Yeah, I think that's something that you just made me think about, and it's almost like a little bit of a tip for people who are clients of stylists, is that the more that you select a stylist whose work you admire and kind of really allow them to take you on a journey of amplifying your taste is the more you stand to realize something on that like iconic scale. So it is going to be ideally stepping a bit out of your comfort zone if they're doing their job well. Now it's interesting because, you know, so in the COVID era, I, like many Americans, because I'm spending so much time alone, I got a dog. And I'm learning so much about the notion of like teaching him via positive reinforcement as opposed to like scolding. So ideally having a lot of things that I encourage him to do as opposed to like things that I tell him not to do. That said, in life in general, we all have some things that we say are no-nos. Do you all have any sort of style, sort of like, I don't do that, or things that you think would so undermine pursuing having sort of like an iconic style resonance?
I think honesty for me is one of, and I'm not saying that against anything else, but that's one of kind of like my guiding lights, because I think, you know, like as we both have been saying, it's a collaboration. Mm-hmm. So I think that, you know, there's always a way, you know, certain ways to tactfully or to comfortably let a client know that maybe is not so flattering. That, you know, but that maybe, you know, that's sort of you're almost like their guardian angel, making sure that you are bringing their vision to light, pushing them slightly out of their comfort zone, but still keeping like the vision intact. To a degree, you're their guardian angel in the sense that like to let someone walk out in something that is unflattering, that will not look good in a photograph, that will not stand the test of time, when you know that, and that's what you're there for. It's your duty, for me, to elegantly, tactfully, however the client is going to best receive it, to really share that, because, you know, clients and anyone look, you know, you look most beautiful or most fabulous when you're most comfortable. So making them feel comfortable and delivering whatever you need to deliver, because that's kind of the end goal, is to make sure that they look their best selves, whether it's like a new version, a more experimental version, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I think that is for me something that is sort of non-negotiable.
Christian, do you have any rules as a designer? I worked for one designer, for instance, who would never do anything on Pierre-waisted. It always had to be sort of fit and flared, narrow waist. He could not look at, well, I gave a little hint there because it's a he, could not look at anything empire-waisted at all. He said, immediately, it looks like she's pregnant. And so that was like a no-no. Literally, if you sketched things, they would get discarded if they are. Do you have any rules of that severity?
I mean, I have certain things I don't really like at the moment, but that doesn't mean I don't have.
Tell us. What do you not like at the moment?
Yes,
what do you not like at the moment?
No, but what I want to say just is what I hate is like when things fit badly.
Okay.
You know, I spoke last time we did a panel where Janelle and I were both in. I spoke a lot about things that doesn't fit you and that you buy it just because it's the size you want to be. One thing I can't look at is I designed a lot of pants for my own brand that have double pleats on the front. And girls will be like, oh, I got into these. It's like, yeah, you got into them because there's space, but there's supposed to be like a crease in the front of the pant. So you want to get a size that's big enough for that crease to actually go from your waist to your ankle. And I hate looking at that crease going about this far down the thigh and then it's stretched out and gone.
Yeah.
That is one thing right now that I cannot look at.
You gave a more literal example, but that's exactly what I was alluding to. Sorry to jump in.
But that's a great rule, is to wear the clothing that fits, not the size number that you want. Because when you walk in the room, they don't know what size number is in the garment. They just know how you look.
And it doesn't matter that number. Nobody's going to see that number unless you're wearing the Balenciaga sneakers where the size is on the outside.
That's true.
Nobody cares. Have you ever been at a dinner and somebody asking you, oh, what size dress are you wearing? No, people will say, you look great in that dress. That's what's important, not whether you're a size 2 or a size 8.
I would even offer that a fast track to getting some iconic style energy is getting comfortable wearing bigger, outsized clothing. I think a lot of people their safe space is in, I got into the smallest size, but some of the people I think that have the most iconic style moments, they're wearing things that are really grand and big and falling off a shoulder, and yeah.
Too small, kind of style. Even a little too small. Look at Cher in the 80s. There wasn't much fabric on her and it worked, right?
But there wasn't much Cher either. So just small.
A lot of hair. A lot of hair.
A lot of hair, though. A lot of hair. And it's funny you bring up Cher in the 70s and 80s, because I think someone like the work that Bob Mackie was doing was really so fascinating, and it's always positing her in every visual in sort of like an iconic tier. Like there was nothing that was like, oh, she got to wear something on a Wednesday. It was always like, how do we explode the planet on Wednesday and then do it again on Thursday and Friday? Janelle, now you have had your work occupy such a place of high visibility, dressing a client like Khloe Kardashian. Can you talk a little bit about sort of the challenges in terms of like the frequency with which she is seen and like keeping her look fresh and new and exciting?
I mean, I feel like, to be honest, I mean, if I'm being totally honest, I feel like that wasn't really anything that we think about. I think, I mean, maybe we do without like really thinking about it, like subconsciously. But I think again, it just kind of goes back to like staying true to who she is, and somebody like any of the Kardashians or anybody that's that like has that much of like a high visibility. I think that it's like coming up with things that are new, but again, still, you know, I mean, it doesn't have to be like new, like reinventing the wheel, but kind of like fresh and cool because they are seen so much. So it is, I don't want to say that it's a challenge by any means to like keep up with it. I mean, I think that it's fun, obviously, or we wouldn't do this, but I think just kind of keeping that in mind as you go, but it isn't like every single time you're like, okay, we have to like outdo the last time. I mean, plus she does like different things, like whether it's like the show or everyday things, or it's a campaign or it's whatever. But I think, I mean, I don't know. I think just like just like keeping it true to who she is, and people like that, I forget who was saying it, but I think with them being open to kind of receiving feedback and kind of being able to like play as you go. And it isn't just like, okay, this is what I want everything has to be tight, everything has to be this, everything has to be whatever, you know what I mean? Because that doesn't really allow you to kind of like evolve as a person, you know what I mean? For them, I feel like somebody that's that big, like they kind of know that they need to be open to things in order to continue to evolve fashion-wise.
Got it. So we're living in a moment in which I think that some of the ways via which people arrived at iconic style are a little bit problematized now, because, you know, it used to be max 4 collections a year, 4 cities, 12 issues of magazines. And so a 3-month lead time to editorial. Now it's like there's 5 collection seasons in 5 cities going on every day. And there's print publications and digital publications and Instagram and native site. And do you think that right now iconic style is sort of in harmony with the pace that we do, or is it difficult with the pace of trend for you?
Difficult.
Lindsay, you're working in a space probably where trend is like so central in what you do. So tell me about your relationship with that. Like, there are all these trends happening, but then you want people to feel like the investments they make will stand the test of time.
So I'm so sorry. Was that question for me? It just cut out when you said, or
yeah, I was saying that you work in a space where trend is really important as people like, are coming to Farfetch. That said, you want them to feel that the purchases they make are investment and will stand the test of time. Tell me about sort of the tug of war there with a trend cycle that is so fast these days.
Of course. And I think that also, I mean, the client, the consumer, is also more educated than they've ever been, but also more confused because they have such an influx of influencer, editorial, like we're all getting like constantly bombarded. Exactly. By, just imagery, to be honest, of every sort. And, the way that everything works these days, it's like it pops up everywhere you go. So I think that that's also something that's really interesting, that we're all navigating, because you have such an influx of everything at all times, and your focus is shifting at a laser kind of like rapid pace.
Yeah.
Exactly. So
are there brands that you, in terms of the work you do, really sort of direct people to sort of like ground them, to say like,
yeah, of course. Of course. I think that there's certain, I think you look at like if you're wardrobing with a client, I think that because I work kind of like on the other side of business where most of my clients, not all, but a lot of them, are typically quite private. So kind of like the opposite side. So I think it's, if you're wardrobing, you're first like really assessing what's there. We're looking at like what we might need to fill, what we want for the season. And I think it depends on the client. I've worked with clients for years who buy, investment pieces and build upon that. And then you have kind of like the ultimate, I don't even know the word that I'm looking for here, but someone who basically reinvents themselves every season.
Yeah,
and
that's the chameleon. Yeah.
Yeah. But like, I mean, I'm the chameleon, but they are the, anyways, I don't know. I'll get the word.
So they're spinning like Wonder Woman and boom, and now all of a sudden they're a pterodactyl, and then they're a,
And so I think it's really collaborative, finding out, but kind of what, really working in tandem. And a lot of my clients I've worked with for years and years and years. So we kind of like have a rhythm where we don't even really speak. Like I intrinsically kind of know where we're headed for that season. But I think it's also kind of looking like breaking down the market, like you said, on trends, what's going on at big houses, smaller houses, price points, because I think that, when you're looking at like your ultra luxe pieces, then you have kind of more of, like contemporary, and then those worlds are starting to blend, seeing kind of what's happening. And there's a lot of shift right now in that market where clients who used to really only want ultra luxe pieces are now far more open to more of your contemporary or up and coming. So I think there's like a lot of the changing of the guards. I didn't quite answer your question, but I think a literal example, like who would be a huge inspiration to me throughout my life, from like kind of like a northern star to just like the way that she ran business, is Elsa Schiaparelli. And I think that Schiaparelli being revived is a great example, like to kind of circle back on the full question, of someone who is maybe used to like classic pieces, but wants something new, but maybe who doesn't want couture, but might not want to be wearing Chanel, but might not want to be wearing Dior, but has a love for them, might have it in their wardrobe. I think that that's just like a good example here is that's my job, to be really informed, to know exactly like the pulse of what's going on in the market, to know that that is the right suggestion for that person, where they may not fully be aware of it because Schiaparelli is not widely publicized. So I think that's a good example.
I think that that's something that you bring up that should be considered, is this notion that like, so Schiaparelli, heritage-wise, is about often like this glamorous surrealism. right? And refined surrealism. They brought that forward, so it's current in its energy, but there isn't like a whole trend of like surrealism is like, like it's not a trend like sock boot. So that
Yeah.
someone could get something that isn't sort of like going to be 5 years from now, like, oh, remember that year when everyone went crazy?
Right.
Yeah, I think that that's a very cool brand to point out, and a very cool strategy almost is to think about locating things that aren't that feel current, but aren't necessarily a part of one of this year's hot trends, because that's the whole notion, is that those trends might not necessarily age so well. Can you,
Yes.
Christian, talk a little bit about how, as a designer, you navigate sort of creating work that is on trend, but also ages in that iconic way? Do you sort of, are there market demands to do certain trends from, let's say, like merchants or anything like that?
It's funny you say that, because we actually at Hervé Léger have a collection, part of the collection called the Icons.
Oh, wow.
It's like the kind of classic Hervé Léger dresses made out of bandage, the way they were done in the 90s. And I make about, 8 to 10 twice a year as a collection. We call them Icons because they kind of stay the same, and we don't put them on sale for a whole year. So you go in, you buy something iconic that you can keep for a long time, and you don't feel, tricked that it goes on sale like 2 weeks after you buy it. They stay for a whole. So that is really creating iconic wardrobe for Hervé Léger. And then on top of that, I create like the more fashion parts, which will be like, an oversized sweatshirt on a super tight skirt into a dress, or, fringe gowns or whatever. Like that's a fashion part. But we have an iconic part, which really sort of, if you wear those dresses, you look iconic because it gives you like that look.
Yeah.
And then I can tell you from my own brand, Hervé Léger, Arkenwas, I'm trying to create icons. But at the end of the day, an icon, you can't just decide this is iconic. But you can start seeing what is it people are gravitating to, what is it people see, and what is it people are reposting about me. And suddenly that becomes iconic. And then I can start feeding it. Do you see what I mean? So in terms of like creating something iconic, yes, you can create, or you can at least try to create something iconic. But you never know until later whether it was iconic, because if it's not remembered, it's not iconic, it's gone.
It's a lot in the response. Yeah. You don't know. Well, some people say when they record a song, they know it's a hit, but often it's about which song ends up getting played the most, and random songs become hits. And I want to encourage all of those who are joining us today we've gotten some questions in the chat. As we speak, feel free to throw your questions into the chat window, and I will get them to our panelists. We touched on this a little bit, but Karen D'Souza asks if there are any style icons today. So Janelle brought up Rihanna. Are there other people that are operating in the style dialogue that you feel really are achieving that iconic status?
I mean, for sure, there are lots of, like, someone very not like Ariana Grande. She's iconic because she keeps doing her hair the same way. So and then it's a little skirt that's like fit and flare. Right? So she created something iconic, and I don't think we'll forget her. So,
I think it's fascinating for me to watch Ariana's sort of cementing of a style legacy, because it really is, to me, not random that Ariana Grande, as a performer, in many ways homages Mariah Carey, and now her visual is in many ways homaging like daydream era Mariah. I remember when she was wearing a lot of Tom Ford for Gucci. And the visual, I see the through line. I think it's really fascinating, because I think a lot of the young Ariana fans, or maybe they're not even that young, I'm just that old, aren't aware of the through line back to to Mariah's moment of the 60s mod hair and the, sort of, oh gosh, who was that Abaddon lensed model? Her name is evading me, but they're photos of a model that Abaddon lens in the black flare pant and the single button shirt. It's not Peggy Moffat. It's not Jean Shrimpton. It's not,
on the tip of my. I know. I'm like right there, but I can't.
Oh my God! I'm remembering her entire life story. Let me. Well, so is there anyone else that's occurring to you all?
I think I'd be remiss if I did not mention, like, if we're talking about current, if I didn't mention like Lady Gaga. I think that she is an extraordinarily interesting example because she transcends generations, style, and it's definitely a different pivot per se, but I think that definitely would be considered because I think that lots of different generations recognize her in this day and age, which is, she's just interesting in general.
I think that you're smack on there. I think for an entire generation now, her high impact visuals have defined style language. The sculptural shoe, things like that. Really, she has hammered home as her own. Christian,
whether you necessarily love it or not, but yes, iconic, definitely.
Yeah. Christian, Janelle, and Lindsay, I really want to thank you all so much for joining us today. This has been really a fascinating look at both what makes someone iconic style-wise, and then as well, what you engage in the process of the work that you do to bring people into that iconic space of aesthetic. I want to thank all of those who attended for being a part of today's Glam Hive Summit. I also want to say that if anyone would like to learn more about the Kelly Initiative and the work we're doing to bring race equity into fashion industries, go to thekellyyinitiative.net. Thank you all so much for joining us today, and have a lovely weekend. Wear your masks and have beautiful holidays. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.